Hey, 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 what do you say, Engineering Tomorrow Podcast Nation? This is Brian Gomsky, your familiar host, and today we are traveling all the way to Kansas City, Missouri. That's right, Kansas City, Missouri, where we are speaking with Spencer Kaufman, who is an awesome inside sales engineer at Midwest Machinery, Kansas City, and Jarrod Wrampe. CRB does engineering, architecture, and construction in relation to biotechnology, pharmaceutical, food, beverage, science, and technology. It's no secret we have a pandemic going on right now, coronavirus or COVID-19, however you would like to call it. CRB is working feverishly with biotech firms and pharmaceutical companies to develop mass-produced treatment, therapy, testing, and vaccines. You know, it's amazing what the world can do when we all get together and focus on a solution for something. So stick around and we will see what CRB is doing to help in this fight.
Broadcasting around the world. This is Engineering Tomorrow, the podcast committed to bringing you the best in commercial construction, design, and engineering from the brightest minds in the industry. This is the stuff they don't teach you in school. So sit back, relax, and open your mind. You're about to get the insider knowledge to improve your next construction project or advance your career. This is Engineering Tomorrow.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. So I'll start off with introductions. Jarrod, welcome to our Engineering Tomorrow podcast. We're super excited to have you. I know ever since we first had coffee and you started talking to me about your industry and what you and what CRB does, I was instantly hooked, and I've been reading articles and following you and CRB on LinkedIn ever since. And the content you guys put out is really incredible and intriguing, especially with what we got going on right now with COVID-19. So we're really excited to have you. We know you're here as a favor and that you have a lot of work to do to get back to. So we'll try to keep it to the point, but I really think our audience is going to really enjoy what you have to say and kind of open the curtain a little bit on the behind the scenes work that goes on. So Mr. Jarrod, do you want to introduce yourself and kind of explain your role at CRB, what you've done in the past, what you're doing now, and kind of how CRB differentiates themselves from other engineering firms and why they are so busy right now?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on, guys. You're actually the second podcast that I've joined here in the since we've all been working from home. So it's kind of surreal. So I've been at CRB. My name's Jarrod Wrampe. I've been at CRB for 19 years. I came to CRB straight from school. I graduated from K-State with Masters in Architectural Engineering in 2001. What I've been doing for the last, for most of my career has been critical utilities or process utilities, as we call them, which really all that means is it's mechanical engineering, but it's all in the context of a process. And in our case, it's all biopharmaceutical processes. So more recently, though, I have, or actually in, the course of my career, I dabbled in project management and had stopped doing that several years ago when we had a $1 billion project be constructed started around 2013. So long story short is I'm back in the PM game, and because we've had a spate of COVID-19 projects blowing up all over the world. So
Right.
We were in dire need of project managers, and that's where I'm losing sleep these days.
Gotcha. So that's where you're sitting. So CRB, they kind of separate themselves by markets, right? So what are the main markets segments that you guys separate your teams as there at CRB?
Sure. I am actually on the biotech team in the Kansas City office. But our market segments are biotech and pharmaceutical, and then food and beverage, and then science and technology. Gotcha. are our basic market segments. And so, I mean, you can get an idea for what those really mean, but we get a little more granular. Mm-hmm. Biotech is basically a biologically derived or something that has to do with live cells or genetic code or something like that. where pharmaceutical tends to focus more on API work as well as the filling and finishing of the product, getting it packaged and ready to be delivered. Science and technology is labs, primarily labs and academia, kind of the precursor to the work that we do in the manufacturing side. And then food and beverages, it's self-explanatory. That's our relatively our newest market space that we're into is the food and beverage space, which is a pretty natural transition from all the hygienic piping and stuff we do in biotech.
Right. So for obvious reasons, I imagine it's all hands on deck in the biotech division right now, isn't it?
It is. We actually have had a lot of my meetings have been focused on this week about how we get resources to actually meet our timelines, because at this point, even the government's getting involved and asking for more than we were already doing. So it has become all hands on deck, and we're in the mode of doing whatever's necessary to get it done.
Sure, that's awesome. Well, not only the U.S., but I'm sure the world is super appreciative of what you guys are doing. And that's another reason we wanted to have you guys on here is to make people aware, all the behind the scenes work that goes on, even from an engineering perspective. So that takes me to my next point. I don't want to make this an entirely about COVID-19 podcast, but I know a good chunk of it will be about that. But before we dive into that, can you kind of talk about the facilities design from maybe a 30,000 foot view when you're talking about a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility, or kind of the hot topic, the advanced therapy and medicinal products. When you're talking about facilities for those, how does that differ from your standard run-of-the-mill commercial building HVAC, keeping people in an office comfortable? Or your standard process at the local manufacturing facility down the street from the neighborhood? What's different about it? What's your role in that? And, maybe what are some of what's the regulation environment like in that world, in that market?
Good questions. The first thing the place I normally start when comparing what we do to other consulting engineers, or what other people might be doing in building schools and hospitals and retail and those sorts of things, is
right.
If you put it in the context of looking at the process and think in terms of a refinery or a chemical plant, those are processes, and the process is the kingpin. It's the center hub of the wheel, if you will, right? Mm-hmm. So in a refinery or a chemical plant, those are outdoors, and you really don't worry about human comfort all that much. So that is pretty diametrically opposed to commercial commercial facilities. Our case is that we actually we have to design a process in the context of a building and keep humans safe and comfortable. So we have to take some of the more extreme parts of the process engineering, from process engineering perspective, and integrate those into a building where we have a good amount of operations, but we also have a highly regulated environment. We can't build a biotech plant outside, not one that is licensed by the FDA or EMA. Uh-huh. So there's regulations that have to do with personnel flows and air quality. And pressurization schemes are extraordinarily important, and is what is allowed to be done in different jurisdictions, whether it's the United States or Europe. There's nuance there, depending on where the facility is going to be built. So it is fairly intensive, and it's more so. Our architects we call them process architects a lot of times, because they not only have to understand their codes and how to build, but they also have to understand how the process actually works, because
right.
those adjacencies and everything are critical to make a facility that functions well.
Right. They coincide together, and you got to know both sides of it. And it sounds like, a lot of your customers and your clients operate on a global scale. So it's not like you can just hang out in the USA code book. You got to be knowledgeable in all of them.
You're listening to Engineering Tomorrow, always striving to bring you the best in commercial construction, design, and engineering.
So you're helping your clients, put together these production facilities, to deliver medicines and pharmaceutical products, things of that nature, maybe even the containers for different types of pharmaceutical products or what have you. So that's your standard run-of-the-mill day in the life at CRB. But what happens when you have a global pandemic? Tell us why you've been working from sun up to sundown, and how has your dynamic changed now that you're supporting these pharmaceutical companies that are trying to come and save the day for the people?
Why has it changed? Well, I mean, you've heard in the news that people are talking about, concerned or anxious about when are we going to have a vaccine, and there's therapies that are being investigated, they're existing, and they're looking for emergency use authorizations for the people that have contracted the virus.
Mm-hmm.
But the vaccine is kind of that's the thing that everyone's pointing to, is that once we have a vaccine, things can kind of go back to normal.
Right.
So I get engaged by our clients all over the U.S. and all over the world to come in and say they figured out a path forward on how it can be done. And there's been a lot of development. I don't know if you've kept up with some of the news surrounding the rapid development of vaccines, and there's one in particular that they sequenced the genome, and they came up with a vaccine candidate within 42 days or something from the time that the genome was sequenced, which is really, really incredible. I mean,
right.
Normally vaccines that can take a decade to develop a platform, and what we have today, and this kind of segues into the ATMP discussion too, is that the ability to manipulate actually synthesize and manipulate the DNA or the RNA of the virus to be able to do this without actually growing the virus, which is why it's so interesting. So there's a lot of cool possibilities out there as a result, and so while vaccines may take a very long time, we need this one like immediately.
Right.
So the reason we're also busy is because you've probably heard it in the news that people are promising that we're going to have a vaccine this fall. The earliest, when I started on my current project, the projection was running phase 3 clinical trial material at the end of 2020 and having a phase 3 trial that would basically be Q1 of 2021. Now they've pulled that up about 3 months. So
incredible.
It was insane to try to get a validated facility by the end of the year. But getting it done before the end of the year and running products that we're putting in humans is really, really remarkable. So yeah, it's definitely all hands on deck, and we're trying to figure out how we even ramp up our construction teams to be able to stay ahead.
For those that don't know, can you define what ATMP actually means?
Oh, yeah. It's the acronym for Advanced Therapy Medicinal Products.
Right.
And really what that means is that these things are all, it kind of comes down to therapies that are derived specifically around using our body's own immune system or genetic material to fight a disease. Sometimes it's talking about delivering a clean copy of a gene to a patient who doesn't have a functioning copy of that gene and therefore is causing a disease. And some of them are, you've heard of CAR T cell therapy. That's a cancer treatment that uses the patient's own immune system. They will draw cells from the patient and then process them and activate them chemically, and then reintroduce them in a way that basically sensitizes them to the cancer that's in their body. So that's using the power of our genome as well as the power of our own immune system to fight cancer is really what these things come down to. And another term that gets used is personalized medicine, which is partially true in the ATMP world. plenty of ATMPs that are want to be off the shelf, but a lot of them, the therapies are personalized.
Gotcha. I guess people would look at this as your day in the life job as a process engineer for a company like CRB. But to me, you guys are part of global history here. And there's a lot of other chefs in the kitchen that are supporting, this pandemic management and vaccine creation. But I mean, you guys are a big leg of the stool that's helping support the development of this vaccine, and it's incredible what you guys are doing. So we appreciate it. I was reading an article that was put out by I can't remember the name, someone at CRB, and they talked about the 3 strategies for successful ATMP facility design. And I don't know if you read that article, but one of the strategies was focus on, basically a modular construction approach so that you can take stuff that's already been designed and slightly tweak it to meet the demand of your next process or whatever you're trying to do. Have you guys been able to see that in action a lot with a lot of this accelerated design that's happening and support, or can you speak on that a little bit?
A lot of that action happens in the contract manufacturing realm. So there's a lot of we have a lot of clients that are the developers of their own therapy or their own vaccine or their own drugs. Mm-hmm. But a lot of them are purely the developers of that material, of that science, and then they transfer that to a manufacturing contract manufacturing group that is responsible with recreating their process and producing the pharmaceutical product, the bulk material. So a lot of these facilities, especially in that CMO world, do work in a modular fashion, do work in ballroom type suites that can be plug and play and adapted quickly to different processes, because they don't actually have the process of their own. They develop one for their client and fit it in the space that they have. So there's a lot of that. I've worked on those kind of projects for many years, and it's in some ways it's very it's easy to distill it down, but it's also, if you start doing all the permutations that are necessary to mm-hmm. serve multiple types of processes in a given suite, it does balloon quickly. So yeah, there is that is a big part of ATMP is the contract manufacturing component. But and that's who we work with quite a bit, and the modular clean rooms and that sort of thing is a great concept and can be used pretty well when you have time. Unfortunately, a lot of those things function like a piece of equipment, so it does take time to get them. So right now there's no capacity, nobody has any. All the manufacturers of those modular clean rooms, they're backed up and they wouldn't be able to hit the timeline to do it this year.
Right. It's crazy. All supply chains are being stretched thin, that is for sure. So would the use of antibodies from plasma of a recovered COVID-19 patient to help a current COVID-19 patient, would that be considered an ATMP?
No, because you're dealing with plasma itself, and you're not changing it appreciably. So we do a lot of work in plasma fractionation as well, and that's really been where I've spent a lot of my career. Cool. There's a lot of therapies out there that you don't realize that are human plasma derived, and so if you go to BioLife or a CSL to donate plasma, that ends up in pharmaceutical products. So BioLife is actually associated with Takeda. So you may have heard that there's a coalition right now, and I'm blanking on the other names, but CSL and Takeda are actually working together to pool all the COVID-19 plasma donations and create a process for a hyperimmune globulin, which would basically deliver this plasma that would deliver an immune response or give the patient an ability to fight the infection.
Wow.
So it's more of a refinement process than it is a genetically modifying. So it's a different branch of the basically how from a regulatory perspective, plasma is kind of in a different branch than say these advanced therapies that we're significantly modifying before reintroducing.
It's crazy. I'm having a little bit of deja vu come through my head that I just have to voice. It's kind of, since we're both K-Staters, I don't know if the plasma bank was there when you were there, but it was a very common sight on campus to see folks with the little cotton swab and tape on their arm, because that was a main source of income for a lot of college students, was to donate plasma. And the irony of the whole situation is we need plasma from past patients, but the schools are shut down. I guess you can target past patients pretty easily if they ever went to the hospital, but it's just a little bit of irony and deja vu running through my head from the K-State era.
Yeah, that is good. I mean, that's part of the reason why the testing and everything is important, to know who's actually had it and recovered, so that we can go, beg for their donation.
You touched on something earlier that kind of had a question pop up in my head. We talked about going from that modular design with the ATMP and taking something that's been kind of developed in the lab in a small, academia lab type setting, or maybe even a pharmaceutical company R&D setting. Is it difficult? Does CRB get involved on taking that process to manufacture that product in a small scale scenario and taking that to a large scale and mass production of that? I mean, is there a lot of difficulty taking that process and magnifying it?
So specifically in the cell therapy world, we're talking ATMPs and everything. That is the absolute problem. Is we talk about scale up a lot of times with traditional biotech and traditional pharmaceutical processes, is how big do I have to make it to get the throughput that I need.
Mm-hmm.
When we're dealing with personalized medicine and cell therapies that are, each patient is an individual lot or an individual batch, you can't scale up, you can only scale out. So there's a lot of manual processes that are used at the development scale that don't translate well to commercial manufacturing.
Gotcha. It's like a build order, if you will.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and it's a lot of hands touching it. So of course, the next level is the next level of development is talking about robotics and how do we automate these things to reduce human interaction and get more client or more patient dense in our facilities. Mm-hmm. So that we can actually be efficient at making these things. Because the way it is now, you're absolutely right. That's the biggest challenge for a lot of cell therapies, is the scaling out is a huge issue.
Right. So Jarrod, can you tell us a little bit about CRB and the construction side of the business and the design build label, if you will, and how CRB can help with not only designing, but constructing a facility as well?
CRB is not just an engineering and architecture company. We are a construction company too. So something that is critical in these hyper fast projects like this is the ability to integrate or to overlap, or maybe even do concurrently design and construction activities. So for everybody's probably familiar with the term design build, which is a misnomer in some ways for what we do, because ours is really more along the lines of an integrated project delivery, which involves heavy involvement from an owner, as well as design and construction trades. So there's many different models out there, but it's something that we've actually gotten quite good at, especially on these fast-paced projects. And we're going to have a great story to tell here by the end of the year.
That was a great episode with Spencer and Jarrod, and it's awesome to kind of look behind the curtain and see how hard everyone's working to squash this stupid virus. You know, you see the headlines, but you don't get to see a lot of the people working really hard behind the scenes. So I'm incredibly thankful for Jarrod for getting on this podcast and sharing some great news and hope and how hard everyone's working to get this taken care of. Again, thanks for listening. Until next time, keep engineering for tomorrow today.
Thanks for joining us on Engineering Tomorrow. If you liked the show, please take a moment to subscribe on iTunes or Spotify. For even more great engineering or construction knowledge, visit engineeringtomorrow.blog.